Next, we have another request for public comment period, in our public comment period, and the special request was from Henry Burke. And Mr. Burke has been granted 10 minutes. So, good afternoon, Mr. Burke. You'll have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Henry Burke. I will address the proposed 2015 Nebraska Mathematics Standards. I've testified before this State Board of Education almost every month for the last 3 years. In almost every case, the subject was standards. I believe that good standards are the key to improving educational outcomes. I've tried different approaches with the State Board of Education and the Nebraska Department of Education, NDE. I've pointed out the problems associated with Common Core standards. I've described Type 1, Type 2 standards, and why Nebraska needs solid Type 1 standards. The NDE seems unwilling to write education standards that are distinctly Type 1. With strong Type 1 standards, educational outcomes will improve, achievement gaps will close, and graduation rates will increase. In the past, I've criticized the proposed Nebraska English standards and the proposed math standards. I have a philosophy that if I criticize something, I should be prepared to offer alternatives or offer a solution. For the math standards, I suggested that the NDE and the board should infuse Saxon math into the standards and utilize the Texas Math TEKS as a guide for the standards. This has not been done. Because the board has not adopted any of these ideas, I am trying a different approach today. Let's look at the national tests. Would Nebraska's poor performance on the national exams get your attention? If Nebraska had good standards, it would show up in the national exams. Likewise, poor state standards would lead to mediocre results on the national tests. I sent 2 reports on the ACT tests to you on July 16th. I trust and hope that you have taken the time to read those reports. How does Nebraska compare with other states on the national exams, such as the NAEP, the SAT, SAT, PSAT? Well, now that the NAEP, the SAT, and the PSAT are fully aligned with the Common Core standards, this leaves only the ACT tests. With 86% of the high school graduates taking the ACT in Nebraska, that offers a pretty good sample, a pretty good measure of performance of Nebraska students. Well, how did Nebraska do on the 2014 math ACT tests? Nebraska was ranked number 29 in the average math score. Simple math would suggest, and that means that 28 states did better than Nebraska on the ACT math. If you think that sounds good, please bear in mind that Nebraska has much fewer minorities than most of the other states, and minorities typically do more poorly on the national exams. When I look at the national test results, the large achievement gaps between whites and minority students really troubles me. It really jumps off the page. For math, the white-black achievement gap in average scale score is 4.9 points, or 22%. And the white-Hispanic achievement gap is 3.5 points, or 16%. As state board members, does an achievement gap of 22% get your attention? If it doesn't, you have no feelings. In a huge California study, noted mathematician Zeev Verman proved that minority students are hurt the most by poor math standards. When students are prepared to take Algebra 1 by the 8th grade, guess which group shows the most improvement? If you guessed minority and disadvantaged students, you guessed correctly. Strong Type 1 standards can make a difference. If you really care about closing the achievement gap in Nebraska, you will demand solid Type 1 math standards. The ACT produced some interesting information on Nebraska students. Only 1,269 Nebraska students or 7%, have taken the series Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Geometry, Trigonometry, and Calculus. 7%, 1269. The typical admission requirement for college engineering is 4 years of math in high school, preferably through calculus. We're just a few blocks away from Memorial Stadium. And I know recruiting, it comes to mind. In fact, there was a front page picture showing people lined up to get Coach Riley's signature. With only 1,269 Nebraska high school graduates prepared for STEM courses in college, where will Nebraska colleges get the students who are ready for college? Because Common Core is dumbing down the curriculum all across the country, the answer is not going to be other states. Those few high school grads who have taken the required math courses will be highly recruited, just like Coach Riley's players. Colleges and universities only have a few choices. They can recruit students from other countries. They can lower their admission requirements. It's a sad situation. Because Dr. Matthew Larson just spoke, it might be useful to look at the speaker and the Go Math textbook. The first question that you as state board members should ask is, how in the world did Common Core textbooks like Go Math get approved in Nebraska schools? After all, I think last time I checked, we're a non-Common Core state. When you have vague, loose, type 2 standards, almost anything will satisfy the standards. Go Math is published by Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, a very large textbook publisher. Matthew Larson is listed as one of the co-authors of their K-12 math series. As one of the Go Math authors, Dr. Larson is paid for writing and is paid for promoting Houghton Mifflin Harcourt's books around the country. Dr. Larson and the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics are strongly endorsing the Common Core standards. Textbook publishers are earning millions of dollars from Common Core instructional materials known as IMs. It's a huge market. Think about it. Each of the Common Core school districts in this country must purchase new instructional materials because their state adopted Common Core standards. Let's look at the Go Math textbook. Niconia, or Nikki Hayes, provided an excellent critique of Go Math, and I will share some of those observations today. The Go Math student workbook for the 4th grade is published in 2 volumes, totaling 671 pages. In this workbook, over 30 pages are spent promoting the partial product and the partial quotient methods of solving multiplication and division problems. These are progressive methods with absolutely no proof of success. By comparison, the traditional algorithms have been used for hundreds of years by almost every country around the world. There is no proof that Go Math improves student learning. Here's an interesting detail about the Go Math book. The publisher requires school districts that adopt Go Math to sign a fidelity of implementation agreement. This agreement says no other methods or materials may be used by the teachers. Finally, you should ask about the Go Math experience in other states. We're not alone here in Nebraska. The one state that I know of that has adopted Go Math is Alabama. Betty Peters is on the Alabama State Board of Education. She said Go Math is hated because the frustration it causes the students and the anger in the adults. I suggest that you contact Betty Peters and get it directly from her, the complaints, for more information. How can we improve the proposed Nebraska math standards? Instead of grouping grades 9 through 11 together, the department needs to separate each grade level and each course. Unless this is done, teachers will not know what is covered in each course and each grade. The NDE should simply list the math standards as follows. Very simple. Grade 8, Algebra 1. Grade 9, Algebra 2. Grade 10, Geometry. Grade 11, Trigonometry. And finally, Grade 12, Calculus. Please notice this. Students
Your
whose
time is
last
up.
high school math course was Algebra 2 or lower have less than a 40% chance of earning any kind of four-year college degree.
You're-
Because the proposed math standards are so deficient, I urge you to reject the standards. Tell the ND to go back to the drawing board.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Your time is up. Next, we will